In this video, we're going to show you how to install the rear axle kit on your Dodge Ram, located right here in the rear differential. Using our 7/8 socket, let's go ahead and loosen and remove our lug nuts. With the lug nuts off, we can go ahead and remove our wheel. Want to go ahead and drain the differential fluid out of this. We want to start by loosening all of our 1/2-inch bolts around here. You want to have a catch can underneath to catch that differential fluid as we do so. Next step is to remove the lower portion of bolts. We're going to continue to do this till we get up to the 2 top bolts. We're going to leave these 2 bolts in here. These are going to act as a hinge for this cover. We're going to go ahead and pop this cover loose from the bottom and let that fluid drain out. I'm going to use a small pry bar and I'm going to go between the differential and the cover. You want to be careful not to damage the surface of the differential as well as that cover. I'm going to slowly pry that cover off, let that fluid drain. Go ahead, loosen and remove the last 2 bolts. I'm going to press in on that cover to hold it in place. Remove that bolt. Go ahead and grab that cover. Go ahead and pry that off and set that aside. The next thing we want to do is we want to go ahead and release this pin from the center of this carrier unit. Now on the other side of this is a bolt that goes through. We want to go ahead and rotate this through. So I was able to go ahead and grab that carrier unit and rotate it around in a position. You also have the option to go ahead and grab that drive shaft and go ahead and spin it this way here. Whatever works for you. You just want to get it to the point where you have access to this bolt right here. Using a 5/16 wrench, go ahead and loosen and remove this bolt. Now you want to go ahead and position this so you can go ahead and pull that out. Slide that pin bolt out, set that aside. Next step you want to do is reach inside. You want to push this center pin out pull that out of the carrier, set that aside. Next step you want to do is kind of reach around the side here, and you want to push that hub inside. That's going to move the whole axle inboard of the differential. When you push in on that axle, you're going to see this come in, and you're going to see a C-clip right here. Now the C-clip may just drop out. What I like to do is have a magnet handy. Work that like that and pull out that C-clip. This is the locking unit that keeps that axle locked into place. When you use a 22mm wrench, you can loosen and remove these bolts here, securing our caliper and bracket to the axle. I'm going to loosen and remove the bottom one first. Though the top one holds everything in place. Go ahead and remove that bolt. Go ahead and take the whole caliper bracket assembly, and we're just going to swing that up on top of our leaf spring here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to secure my caliper up here. I don't want this to fall and put abnormal pressure on that flex hose there. So you can just use a retaining strap. Just kind of lock that in place just to hold it. Go ahead and grab your brake rotor, pull that off and set that aside. Next step is to go ahead and grab the hub here and pull it out. Now the hub has the axle that goes all the way into that differential, so it can be a little awkward removing this. Go ahead and slide that out, and you're going to feel it drop down inside the axle tube. But you want to try and level that off, pulling that out. Go ahead and set that axle aside. I want to go ahead and remove this seal. We're going to use a seal puller here. You want to go in behind, work your way around. Want to be careful not to damage the inside of the surface there of the axle. That's why we're going to use this tool. Get to remove that. I'm going to install our bearing puller tool. I'm going to go ahead and tighten down a nut here. We're going to use our slide hammer, and what we're going to do is we're going to try and give this a few good bonks. This tool should pull the bearing out of the axle tube. Here's our bearing removed completely. At this point here, go ahead and use a clean towel and wipe this out. You want to go ahead and inspect the inside of the axle tube. Make sure the surface of where that new bearing is going to go is nice and smooth. I went ahead and got some fresh differential oil, and I just put it on the inside where the bearing is going to get pressed into. I'm going to use a bearing driver tool here. Go ahead and line that up. I'm going to go ahead and start tapping this in. We're going to do this evenly so that that goes in all the way and sits flush on the inside of that lip over there. Periodically, you want to stop and check and make sure that that bearing is going in evenly. You'll hear it and feel it bottom out. Just do a couple light taps. Gonna wipe this out. Next, I want to go ahead and install our seal right here. I'll get that lined up. And we're going to tap this into place. Do the same thing with this. Give it a few taps, make sure it's going in nice and even all around. You want to make sure that when you're done, the seal is flush with the tube. Go in just a little bit more. Ours was able to go in just a little bit beyond the lip there, but you could tell that it was fully seated by the sound and the feel. Now, when axle shafts are shipped, they normally have some sort of protective coating on there. I want to go ahead and use some spray solvent. I'm going to spray this down. Go ahead and make sure you can use a rag or a towel to go ahead and clean everything off here. Once that's cleaned off, it's pretty much ready for installation. Using a little bit of differential oil here, I'm going to put some on the seal itself. Let's go ahead and grab that axle. I'm going to slide this into the unit here. Now, as you're sliding this in, you want to be careful not to drag the axle shaft inside the tube. You're going to get to a point where you have to get the axle shaft into the bearing inside, so you're going to have to kind of move that around a little bit. Get it through the bearing and this inboard seal. Now what we're going to do is just wiggle this out a little bit. Let's go ahead and get our wheel studs installed here. Now we want to go ahead and seat these studs I'm going to use a large oversized nut to put over the stud and then install a wheel lug nut itself. Going to tighten that down by hand until that's seated. I'm going to go ahead and use our 3/4 inch socket. I'm going to go ahead and tighten this down until the stud is seated on the back side. You inspect the back side of the hub flange itself, make sure that stud is seated, continue for the other 4. Once you have all 5 studs installed, we'll go ahead and spin that nut and the spacer off. At this point here, we're going to go ahead and push our axle in to our gear right here. Once it comes through, we'll go ahead and put that C-lock back in on the inside of this gear. Now at this point here, while we're working on this here, our spider gears had fallen out. These 2 units right here. It's not critical. They do go in place here. We're going to show you how to install those. It's not the end of the world. Go ahead and just set those aside. Installing your C locking ring here. That simply goes into the axle. You can have someone on the outside grab the hub and pull out that axle to lock that in. Or from the inside here, you can simply use your pry bar. Go ahead and pry that in like so. Now with our axle fully installed, we can now go ahead and install our spider gears and then put our pin back in. Go ahead and take one of your spider gears and you're going to reach around the back side of the carrier and you're going to set the gear into the main gears on the other side. Basically just drop that into place and take the other gear, pop that into place here. You can reach over with one hand or you can have someone help you. And if you rotate that hub, it's going to rotate those spider gears back and forth. I'm going to rotate this back until the holes line up with the spider gears. The top is lined up, the bottom one is lined up. Now we can go ahead and drop our pin back into position. Go ahead and take your pin, do an overall inspection of it. We have the whole side here, which is going to line up right here with our other pin, with our bolt. And go ahead and slowly start to work that down inside. And at this point here, it appears that our axle isn't far enough in. Not a big issue. Go ahead and work that through, making sure that your hole lines up for where your bolt is going to be installed. Once that's lined up, go ahead and start threading that bolt in. Get it started a few threads. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little dab of blue Loctite on these threads because I do not want this pin to back out at any given time. I'm going to thread that bolt in. I'm going to make sure it's nice and tight. Once that bolt bottoms out, you want to go ahead and give that a good push. Make sure that's tight. you're all set. Now at this point here, before we install our cover, we want to go ahead and clean off the remainder of the old gasket material. You can gently use a razor blade. You want to be careful not to damage the housing here. Once we get off all the gasket material, we're going to go ahead and use some solvent, continue to clean off the rest and get rid of any oily residue. That way there, our new gasket maker will adhere and seal properly. When doing this here, make sure that none of the old gasket material falls down inside the differential. Use some solvent, go ahead and clean this up. I'll go ahead and make sure you continue to do this until you have some nice clean steel or a nice clean surface to put that cover onto. Before we install a differential cover, you need to clean off the old gasket material. You can go ahead and start with a razor blade. We're just going to continue this process until we can get off all of the large pieces here. I'll go ahead and pull out our fill plug here. Go ahead and set that aside. I'm going to wipe this down, and we're going to continue to clean this using our solvent in that razor until we have a pretty clean, bare steel surface. I want to go ahead and apply some RTV to the differential cover here. I'm going to put down a thin bead all the way around the perimeter. And once you have that bead laid down, I'm going to go ahead and smear that gently around. You want a nice even coat. So we're just going to go ahead and work that. What we're going to do is let this set for about 5 minutes before installing it onto the differential. You want to go ahead and line up your cover accordingly. It's going to line up this way here with the fill plug on the right hand side. Going to line this up. We're going to start installing the bolts on the top. Get these threaded in. And then we'll continue getting them installed the rest of the way down and around. Once these are all installed, let's go ahead and snug those down. Once these are all tight, you want to give it about roughly an hour to 2 hours. Let that RTV seal, dry up, and do its job. After that time frame there, we can go ahead and start filling our rear differential. Go ahead and install the brake rotor. Go ahead and remove our securing strap off of the caliper and bracket. Let's go ahead and swing this over. Let's go ahead and get the bolts lined up and installed. Get that upper bolt started in a couple threads. I'm going to go ahead and install a little bit of blue Loctite on those threads. And get that on the top one as well. Once you have both of those threaded in, let's go ahead and snug those down. With both of these bolts in and snug down, let's go ahead and torque those down. Go ahead and torque this down to 100 foot-pounds. Do the same for the top. We're going to use a recommended gear oil to fill through here. We're going to continue to fill it to the point where you can just put your finger in the fill port and touch gear lube oil. So at this point here, I'm going to put our finger in, and it comes out just on the end here. So it's just below the fill port. I'm going to wipe down our cap here. And then go ahead and install our plug. Let's go ahead and line up our wheel. That lined up, and let's go ahead and install our lug nuts. Once we have all these on, I'm going to go ahead and snug them down. Let's go ahead and torque down the lug nuts to 135 foot-pounds.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.